evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Thanks for joining us. Here are your top stories.
We've had ongoing conversations the last, I'd say, 2-3 months with ministers, with the Prime Minister's office. We feel very good that there will be some good news coming for our region.
ISO is looking at the needs and the capability of the area.
I'm going to stay here to show, I'm not happy. It's not fair things to do.
We begin tonight with a fire at a high-rise apartment on Ouellette Avenue. The fire department says that one person has died.
The alarm went off about 1:30 and it just didn't stop. Different ambulances and fire trucks came different times, and I could tell something was pretty serious.
It started early this afternoon just north of Erie Street. The fire was on the 15th floor. Firefighters arrived and found a person dead inside of a unit. No word on the cause at this time. It is still under investigation. The Ontario Fire Marshal's office is sending a team to Windsor to look into this. The ArriveCAN app might become optional. Sources tell CBC News that Ottawa is leaning toward dropping border measures, and that includes having proof of COVID-19 vaccinations and potentially making the app optional.
I feel very confident that our government and those ministers responsible for those files have heard and understand those unique challenges to border communities. And furthermore, I feel very optimistic that we will have a good decision on September 30th, which is when the ArriveCAN and the Orders in Council are officially reviewed.
These measures have been in place since the border reopened. Last night, we told you about border area politicians writing an open letter to the federal government. They wanted to see the measures dropped, and it's unclear what the United States will do. As of now, people need to show proof of a COVID-19 vaccination to cross into America. One doctor tells CBC News it's the right time to drop the requirements.
Yeah, I mean, look, I on the base of it, very much agree with the decision. This really should have been taken away a long time ago. So that's, I think, my opposition to it. We really don't need this anymore. The situation on the ground, I work first line with COVID patients and have been doing so since April of 2020. And I'm seeing here that things have changed drastically. I don't think these types of measures are needed anymore.
The ArriveCAN app has been a barrier for tourists. And as Sophia Harris reports, some Americans might be switching up their travel habits.
When I opened it up, I thought, oh my God, what is this?
American Kathy Pedlewski was overwhelmed when she first read this long list of instructions included in her COVID-19 home test kit. Pedlewski was randomly selected to take the PCR test when crossing into Canada last month for a day trip to Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario.
Rotate the swab.
Pedlewski had to do the test herself, while a health professional supervised by video conference on Pedlewski's smartphone. Then she had to courier the test to a specified address.
It ruined my day. And the final straw, the drop. Really? You know, go out of my way, I don't even know where I'm going, to find a FedEx?
Pedlewski says she won't return to Canada until the random test is dropped. Several tourism organizations also want it nixed.
It's a very stressful situation for their guests.
This tourism director in Northern Ontario says visitors to the area can face big challenges if they're selected for the take-home test because some regions have spotty cell service and no FedEx drop-off sites.
We're hearing from guests that they won't be back because it's been such a negative experience. Until the testing is gone, they're not coming back.
And Pedlewski questions the purpose of the program as her negative test result arrived after she returned home.
I didn't see how this was protecting Canadian citizens.
Ottawa has earmarked up to $1 billion for arrival testing and says the program helps monitor COVID-19 transmission coming from abroad. But some medical experts say you can get the same results for much cheaper by testing wastewater.
You can look at wastewater coming in on different flights. You can measure it at airports. There's just lots of different ways that you can do this creatively.
We'll come back to that issue separately.
On Tuesday, Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos declined to talk about ending random testing, but suggested an announcement is coming. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Toronto.
The lack of affordable housing options in Windsor has driven one man to extreme lengths, protesting with a hunger strike. The CBC's Jennifer LaGrassa looks into his case and the cause.
For 27 hours, Moses Tudor went on a hunger strike outside of a housing registry office in Windsor. He's advocating for more information from the service, which he says he can't rely on for housing.
And I'm going to stay here to show and to, I'm not happy. It's not fair things to do, and I stay here as long when my body is going to stay on.
Last year, Tudor was diagnosed with cancer and was forced to stop working as a long-haul truck driver. Through the Ontario Disability Support Program and Canada Pension Plan, Tudor says he gets $1,758 a month, but he couldn't keep up with his expenses and lost his apartment. He's been staying at a budget hotel and is left with only $53 for other expenses at the end of the month. In April, he applied for subsidized housing and says he was told he was priority. But in August, he was told the application was done wrong and had to be resubmitted. Since the end of last year, a friend has been helping him get by.
I thought by September he was gonna be in his own apartment. Ever since he found himself with no income, that we have helped him on and off with what was needed. We made sure he was not gonna sleep in his car.
In an email, the Windsor-Essex Community Housing Corporation said the wait time to get housing depends on location preference, family size, and housing availability, along with other factors. These, it said, make it difficult to give a timeline. As of June, there were 6,300 households that applied for affordable housing in Windsor-Essex. 477 of these are priority, and 419 are people experiencing homelessness. The United Way Windsor-Essex County said New Statistics Canada data released Wednesday shows that people's incomes aren't keeping up with the cost of housing.
We know that affordable housing is not keeping pace with the need of our community.
Tudor ended his hunger strike last night, but he says he'll continue to protest outside of the housing registry. Jennifer LaGrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
It's not just housing that people are struggling with. The growing cost of living is hitting people hard, from groceries to gas. I'm joined now by Garuptesh Pander, a professor of finance at the University of Windsor. Professor, thanks for doing this.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. My pleasure.
So just to start, inflation in Canada was at a 39-year high in July, and it's slightly lower now. And we've watched the Bank of Canada hike interest rates, so prices are high and the cost of borrowing money is going up. So what kind of financial challenges is this situation creating for Canadians?
Okay, so as you mentioned, the August number year to year, comparing CPI from 12 months ago to now, that's at 7% in August, and it fell from 7.6% in July. So it seems to be stabilizing and moving in the right direction. And it was largely because of a decline in gasoline prices. That was about 9.6% down in August. And then also, but food prices went up by 10.8%. So we have a mixed story here, and it's a good trend going in the right direction, but we're not out of the woods yet. And but we also have to keep in mind that energy and food prices can be extremely volatile. And so we have some things happening, for example, in Europe, extreme weather, geopolitical situation in Russia, Ukraine, which can in the future, in the coming months, change the story. So Bank of Canada, their target rate is 2%, and I believe that they will continue to keep the rate higher. It's 3.25% starting in September, and they will maintain it probably during most of 2023 next year.
Right. What about for people living in Windsor who shop in Detroit? And we've been watching the Canadian dollar tumble, and interest rates are up in the United States as well. So what does that all mean for a border city like ours?
So, so there are two aspects to this. One is the inflation rate in the U.S. That was about 8.3 in August. So it's higher than the Canadian rate, which means that prices generally went up more in the U.S. But the second impact would be connected to exchange rates. As you mentioned, it has fallen in the last few weeks, but generally it's been in the range between 0.74, to the US dollar and up to 80 cents. Relatively stable, over the last few periods, moving in that range. So there's not a big margin, there from in terms of changes in the interest rate, and but it does make it a little bit more expensive compared to say 1 month ago. And the second is, during COVID, there was less traveling back and forth, and I think people were doing more shopping across the border, and the habits change over time as well. And with the higher fuel costs, maybe people are not doing as much cross-border shopping as they used to before COVID.
And just before I let you go, you said that things are stabilizing. So I'm wondering, what is the #1 factor that people should pay attention to get a sense whether or not things will get better?
Okay, so the inflation rate is an important barometer of what's happening in the economy, and it's an interaction between for example, households who are consuming, and then you have the firm or the producer sector, and then you have the central bank, which is setting interest rates and affecting the cost of money. So if there's a disbalance, in one of those places, it will show up in changes in prices. We do have a social security net in Canada, 14 to 44 weeks of UIC benefits. But ultimately, people do have to do some planning, and they have to look at budgets for the next, maybe cut down on discretionary expenditures to some extent, and then look at their asset portfolio, speak to their financial advisor to make sure that they're protected from the effects that we talked about earlier.
Thank you so much for your time, Professor.
Okay, thank you very much.
Irek Kusmierczyk is a professor of finance at the University of Windsor. And as you heard, rising costs are a big concern for consumers. We've also seen how energy needs are front and center in the last few months. All this as energy producers in Canada try to meet the country's climate goals. Traditional and renewable energy providers have been meeting in Calgary to talk about just that. CBC's Aaron Collins was there.
A meeting of the minds in Canada's energy capital. But the question on those minds has shifted in recent years.
Certainly in the Western world, there's no question about the if anymore.
The debate about if a shift to net zero carbon emissions will happen replaced these days by a focus on how it will come about.
The forces of change are in place today. However, not all of the conditions are there for the kind of technologies that we have to bring to bear in 28 short years.
Embracing technologies like wind and solar power, even in the heart of Canada's oil and gas country, key to Canada getting to net zero emissions by 2050.
Alberta is well known for its fossil fuel resources, but we've also got phenomenal renewable energy resources, and we're experiencing a boom in the sector with billions of dollars of wind and solar projects under construction today.
But more renewables won't be enough. Canada's oil and gas producers will also need to get greener too, and quickly, something the country's major producers have committed to doing.
Because we're such big emitters, we have to be a big part of the solution as well.
For the oil and gas industry, the key to that solution is carbon capture and storage.
We know it works. We know we can do it. It's expensive and it takes time. So, would we like to have it built tomorrow and already be reducing emissions and storing? For sure.
No easy task. Still, a sense here that meeting Canada's climate goals is doable.
Over the course of human history, there's not been a challenge when we've mobilised collectively that we haven't been able to solve for. I think we're just starting to get that sense of urgency.
Of course, the clock is ticking. Canada has just 28 years to meet its emission reduction targets, and the question of how that will actually happen has yet to be answered. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
Power will be a problem in Windsor. We've heard concern about having enough energy for major projects. Today, a power generation site in Ford City pushed for expansion.
What we're intending on doing is basically putting the options in front of the AESO. And the AESO will look at them and look at other things that can be done in the area and pick those that provide the greatest amount of capacity in the short term, but also those that are the lowest cost options, the combination of the two. we're pretty confident that this site and what we're looking at will definitely come to fruition.
You heard him use the term ISO there. That's an independent group that makes decisions about Ontario's power grid. This site generates 92 megawatts of power. One expansion option could add another 40 megawatts. That's enough to power 40,000 homes. Capital Power says it would not create any extra emissions, but it would be a small dent in the projections. A report sent to Council says Windsor Essex needs at least an additional 500 megawatts of power by 2030. Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced Moscow's first troop mobilization since the Second World War. He's calling up hundreds of thousands of reservists to fight in Ukraine. And there was a chilling warning, a thinly veiled threat about his willingness to use nuclear weapons. CBC's Briar Stewart has the latest.
In cities across Russia, some took to the streets trying to denounce a war and a plan to force hundreds of thousands to fight in it. The arrests came quickly. This morning, people in Russia learned the government will call up 300,000 reservists, mostly young men who went through basic training. But some already knew a draft was underway.
I'm not happy with this. I want we and other countries to live in peace.
We're only identifying this student by his first name, Georgi. But the 23-year-old received a draft notice on Monday. He hopes to be exempted, but knows there are no guarantees. He and his family watched Putin's address in disbelief.
I was shocked. My mother was crying.
Russia's move to call up reservists is a sign of how much its military is struggling. Last week, it was pushed back from a large area near Kharkiv. Today, the Defense Ministry said that nearly 6,000 soldiers have died so far, a significant underestimate, say Western officials. And it was the West that Putin took aim at during his pre-recorded address. We will, without question, use all the means at our disposal to protect Russia and our people, he said. This is not a bluff. He said the 4 Ukrainian regions that plan to hold referendums have Russia's full support. After all, they're all currently occupied by Russian troops. By voting to join Russia, analysts say it sets the stage for further escalation.
He will exactly to organize the referendum, to state that those regions are integral part of Russia. And if someone will attack or conduct any kind of military operations, the use of nuclear weapons will again be raised.
On the streets of Moscow, hours before the evening's protest, many were supportive of the government's plan and say the referendums are a long time coming. They want to live decently. That's why they're looking to be rescued by joining Russia, said one man. We need to protect them, and we need to be united in everything. But Russia's war next door now feels even closer to home, and it will get harder for some to keep carrying on as if life here hasn't changed. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Let's take a live look outside there. It is the final day of summer, if you can believe it. We had some stormy weather earlier today and partly cloudy conditions expected overnight with a mix of sun and clouds. Tomorrow, Dahlia Asher will be here after the break with your weather. Stay with us. Dahlia Ashry joins us now for a look at our local weather forecast. And Dahlia, as we say hello to you, we say goodbye to summer.
That is right. It's the last day of summer. We're going to say goodbye to it, as you said, and we're going to say hello to our sweaters for tomorrow. So we are expecting some rain overnight tonight, and then tomorrow some sunshine, but cooler temperatures for the first day of fall, which is quite accurate in what we should be expecting to see this time of year. The normal high this time of year is 21 degrees. Today's normal high is 29, so we're sitting well above seasonal temperatures. Again, it is the final day of summer, so I'm sure tomorrow's normal high will change. The normal low is usually 11, and we are sitting at 17 degrees today. And look at that. Tomorrow is the first day of the fall equinox, and we will get into those details on tomorrow's show and what that means, but that's a little teaser. The Windsor temperature currently is 29 degrees. Goddard's a little bit cooler, 23 degrees, and a little bit cooler out in 24. There was a severe thunderstorm watch for the area earlier today, and that's currently been lifted, but that doesn't mean that rain is not on its way tonight. That's still a condition. Now, the current temperature, including the humidity, it feels more like 37 degrees. So again, that taste of summer is sticking around, and it feels cooler in Kitchener, 31 degrees. Now, like I said, we are expecting some rain tomorrow, but let's talk about the windy conditions. Some strong winds tonight. Winds will be gusting up to 41 kilometers an hour, so quite windy, and that will be carrying through all the way until tomorrow afternoon, and in the evening it'll be 36 kilometers an hour at around 8 o'clock. So expect a windy day for tomorrow and Friday. Now let's talk about the cold front and what's giving us those cooler temperatures. Now, as the humidity goes away and that cold front cuts through the humidity, that's what starts to give us those cooler temperatures for the fall, and that's what we're expecting to see. It's already starting tonight, as you can see here, 12 degrees in southwestern Ontario, all across the board, a cooler evening along with the rain, and then we start with those single digits tomorrow night, well, mostly just tomorrow night, and then back to those double digits on Friday, and dry conditions all throughout except for Sunday and Monday. So we're going to say hello to fall tomorrow, Katarina.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Dahlia.
Thanks, Katarina.
When we come back, we are going to go to the East Coast for a fisherman's discovery. Stay with us.
home.
We have a whale of a tale to end tonight's show. It's about a lobster fisherman from Nova Scotia. He came across a humpback whale carcass earlier this summer. He's got big plans for the bones and told CBC's Paul Palmer all about them.
This is not something you see every day. It's a skeleton of a juvenile humpback whale found deceased off Briar Island this summer. Lobster fisherman Jess Tudor has been cleaning up the 150 bones he's collected from the mammal after it washed up in a very remote section of the island.
It was about probably about 2.5 kilometers each way, so it was like 5-kilometer trip for each time. And sometimes I put 3 trips to a day because I was always concerned that I was going to lose it.
Tudor was able to salvage most of the whale bones, but there was one that was tougher to bring home than the others. The skull of the whale weighs about 150 kilograms, and he needed help lifting it onto a small boat, and a lift at the wharf was used to get it onto the roof of his wife's van.
It was a huge surprise. I was just so happy. I mean, what better way to say I love you than here's a whale skull, surprise!
Jess Tudor's love of whale bones is in his family genes. His mother owns the Briar Island Lodge, and she's a whale bone collector too. 2 large humpback whale jaw bones flank the front entrance, and inside there are many other whale bones for visitors to see.
We used to steal our father's boat and go out in the bay and get lost in the fog and watch the whales. And like right from a very young age, so we were like always used to whales and sharks and seals and that sort of thing. And it's just sort of part of our life. It's part of being by the ocean.
Jess Tudor believes this humpback whale was killed by a large vessel because a large part of one of the scapula bones was cut. He wants to piece together the skeleton into a form of educational art to honor the memory of Joe Howlett, a member of the Campobello Whale Rescue Team in New Brunswick. He died while saving an entangled North Atlantic right whale in 2017. Paul Palmer, CBC News, Briar Island.
That is it for CBC Windsor News. For news anytime, you can always go to our website at cbc.ca/Windsor. And you can, of course, also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.